another foul on Ward. His third for setting a screen.
Because of physical play, although Jordan Taylor just got caught with a moving screen.
Pick and roll. And a foul, offensive foul coming up. Ken Valentine standing right there.
Izzo dying for a moving screen.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special Sunday edition of the Moving Screen podcast. I'm Brendan Quinn of The Athletic, Dylan Burkhardt of Hoops on the other side. We were going to record tomorrow, and we both were bored today, so we decided to talk some hoops. So here we are. Dylan, how are you doing?
I want to start this podcast with a question.
Oh, boy.
How many rebounds would you pull down against Oakland?
Man, everyone just trashing dudes out here real quick. I don't know. I think I could maybe get a couple.
Over or under Aaron Henry? The Henry line of 2.
Man. That was now I wasn't at the press conference. I haven't watched the tape, but I did see Izzo's comment where he said he might start Steven because he had more rebounds than Aaron Henry did against Oakland, and I'm sure he was kidding, and I saw Chris Solari note that he was kidding in his tweet of it, but like at the same time, I'm just not understanding what good things come from comments like that at this point when this guy's confidence is clearly just completely shattered. But that's me. I'm just an overly sensitive, features writer. So what do I know?
True.
How about you? How many would you pull down?
I think I would have about a 1-to-1 rebound to foul to minute ratio. So I get a few boards, a few fouls. I wouldn't be long for the game.
You're just going in, just creating chaos.
That would be my strategy.
I love it. So I was at Michigan, Oregon yesterday. Both games were at the same exact time, which was it was not a ideal moving screen schedule. Just brutal. I would need to talk to the league office, but we obviously will be focusing a little bit more here to start the show today on Michigan, Oregon. That was obviously a major top 20 game. Lot to kind of unpack there as well. So we will get more into, we have a bunch of reader questions to get into. We'll get into Michigan State when we get into those. So make sure you are subscribed to both The Athletic and Hoops. I wrote a column on yesterday's game. Dylan broke it down as he always does in every imaginable way. And you got some content up there from your flock of
we've got
contributors.
A lot of content coming. Yeah, we got it all. There's plenty to read about if you want to relive the Michigan-Oregon game, but I don't know how many people are excited to do that, but hey, we'll have more content moving on too.
If you're looking for a quick and easy Christmas present, I tweeted out a link for a subscription to The Athletic for $30 for a year. I don't think you're going to do much better than that. I know, Dylan, what kind of deals do you have going on over there?
We've got gift subscriptions. We've got deals going on all the time. So yeah, you stop by and you should stumble into something along those lines.
Go get on.
What does it say about you if you just give everyone a gift subscription to read what you write? I know you tweeted that was kind of your strategy. I don't know how I feel about that move.
It wasn't my strategy. I was sitting there trying to come up with stuff, and I said, man, I wish I could just go buy athletic subscriptions in bulk, but even I can't be that self-aggrandizing. So
okay.
That is not my strategy. I hope most people that I'm either related to or know closely have a subscription. I know they probably don't, but maybe one day. Maybe I'll have to do some better work, and we'll see. But all right, let's get into, I know you've got a lot on your mind. You want to talk about this game, not only this game, but how people are reacting to it. I'm also it's been curious to me as well. So let's talk a little hoops and let's talk some psychology.
There's a lot to unpack from that game. It pretty much had it all. It came in waves, chapters. There's different issues, different good things, bad things, a lot to unpack, especially for a game in mid-December, right? So Michigan looked pretty much awful for the first, 15 minutes. I don't think you could have drawn up a worse start. Came back, got back in the game. Every time Michigan probably had a chance to grow a lead more than a possession, Michigan made some kind of boneheaded mistake. Eventually cost them in overtime. So I guess where do you want to start with this game? There's a lot to dive into.
I would say your big takeaways on the I thought it was a wildly entertaining game for whatever that's worth. But I wouldn't say it was the best, game in terms of I don't know, execution and things like that. There would probably be a lot to be desired on both sides, but like in terms of a home loss to Oregon, like what was this one where you're kind of like, man, that's should have had that one, or like how do you kind of view, I hate the term, sometimes quality loss, but how do you kind of view this in the bigger picture?
So I think it's twofold. First off, Oregon's a really good team. They lost the 2 games in the Bahamas, but both were single possession games in the final seconds. And that Gonzaga team is legit. Just won at Arizona last night. I don't think you can have a quality loss at home, even if you don't want to use that. So I think a home loss is something that does actual damage to your resume, your season, however you want to put it. How much? Really up for debate and depends on what comes next. I think a lot of people got carried away with, I guess, winning 3 games in 3 days in the Bahamas.
Sure.
And it seems like the only reactions are nothing that happened in the Bahamas mattered because now Michigan lost 3 games, or Michigan lost. It's just like it's all or nothing, right? Michigan's either a top 5 team or the entire season is going downhill and everything's
right.
Truth is, usually the truth is somewhere in the middle, right? This is a team that played a single-digit scrimmage against Detroit before the season started. Detroit's one of the worst teams in college basketball this year. They've won 1 game. This kind of seasons are very fluid. They change all the time. You go through things. You have good moments, bad moments. If you think about where Michigan has stood the last 2 seasons at this point in the year, and then where they ended up at the end of the year, they were flipped, right? Last year, Michigan looked like the best team in basketball right now. Kind of fizzled out. The year before that, complete disarray, I would say, almost trying to survive at this point in the season, ended up in the Final Four. So I think there's some good stuff to take away from that game as far as what Michigan might look like down the road. But I also think that it takes a lot of the momentum out of your sails when you lose 3 out of 4 like that. And I mean, this is the first time I think in a few seasons that Michigan's actually lost 2 games in a row. But also 7 games against top 50 teams in 17 days.
Yeah.
They don't play another stretch of more than 3 games in a row against top 50 teams the rest of the year. That's a ludicrous stretch of schedule.
Yeah, and not only that, but all this entire time while trying to engage a major piece into the system. Franz Wagner did not get the benefit of any of those early season games. He just walked in blind to this pretty ridiculous stretch. I don't think that can be undersold here.
No, think about it in the sense of it was so important for Michigan to win the Battle for Atlantis because it gave them margin for error in this situation, right? You didn't want to be playing this 5th, 6th, 7th game of this stretch needing to win every one, right? What if you go 1-2 in the Bahamas? All of a sudden, your season's almost over at this point, right?
Oregon needed that game yesterday way more than Michigan did because they needed a quality win. Yeah,
and Oregon played 1 game against the Bahamas. A little bit of a lighter load. Obviously, they're traveling across, and who knows how much any of that stuff matters. But also, Dana Altman can coach.
Yes.
Might not be a good guy, but he's a hell of a coach.
Yeah. Wow. Look at you just throwing putting some digs in there. All right, here we go.
Got a little bit of
I know.
baggage in the closet there.
Oh, a little bit is that's spilling out of that closet. Yeah.
Okay. So that's where I'm at, I guess, big picture with this kind of last week.
Yeah. So the game itself, everyone's focusing on the ending here. which I get because all the obvious reasons. I think it maybe overshadows way more important talking points of the game, but we can certainly get into it. People seem to be taking exception with two main things. One, that it was Xavier taking that shot in that situation, and two, that Jon Teske was not on the floor. There were two teams on the court for that last play, and one played that possession way better than the other one. I thought Oregon really defended it well, starting with Pritchard forcing the entry pass way into the backcourt. Mm-hmm. And then if you watch when Isaiah Livers comes up to set the screen, Will Richardson comes with him. He completely blows up. Pritchard blows up Livers on the switch. Richardson switched on to Simpson, put length that can move on him as opposed to kind of a true big, which Michigan was, I'm told, hoping to have in that situation. I think they were hoping that the big man was going to come out to guard whoever was setting that screen. So in this case, that was Okuru, who was a 6'9" guy. And sometimes plays don't go as hoped or planned. And once Livers got blown up in that on that switch, things kind of went sideways. Xavier Simpson had to just kind of go create whatever he could find. And Brandon Johns was open underneath. But as you pointed out when we were talking, how many times does he catch that drop pass and finish it? There's just a lot. There was a lot going on there. I didn't have any major issues with that play or the results. You got two great looks at tips. It was kind of unfortunate. Actually, you had two guys in great position. You'd rather have one who could have just caught and finished it. But you had Johns and Livers side by side. Both, it looked to me like both touched it at the same exact time almost, that tip in. Yeah,
so you basically got two shots within 5 feet of the basket with 10 seconds to play. I get that. I'm not really sure what people would want to see happen on that situation otherwise. Obviously, the shot didn't go in, but the fact that Simpson drew two defenders, even though he didn't find Johns, meant that Johns was wide open for the tip in. He didn't make it, but that happens sometimes, right? I don't really know. I have a hard time complaining much with that last play based on even what Michigan got. You screen with the 4-man because he's a better pop option. If they don't switch that, you can hit him. It's not there. Simpson gets downhill. Like, executionally, I don't think it went that wrong. And Juwan said after the game that he was happy with what they got out of that play.
Yeah, and they didn't. You saw it over the course of the game. They stopped sagging off Wagner as he started making shots. And if you rewatch that last play, the guy who was standing with Franz in the corner, like both feet planted, like you can tell that he was told to just stay home. He does not move an inch. So there wasn't an option for the kick there. If people want to bring up the Teske minutes, let's get into that a little bit.
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't really thought about that as impacting the last play. Obviously, like maybe Teske tips it in, but I think that is more comes into play in the last 7 minutes of the game, maybe beyond that.
Yeah, and I made the point like, okay, Teske finished that game at -11 on the plus-minus. Johns finished +10. Obviously, everyone knows moving Johns to the 5 changed that game. It changed the direction of the afternoon for the better for Michigan. I feel like if they had put in Teske on that last play and the same exact play occurred, people would be freaking out about, well, how did you take Brandon Johns out when he changed the whole game? You know what I mean? Like, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Well, let me tell you something. If the shot didn't go in, people would be freaking out. It doesn't matter who's on the court. And if the shot went in, people would be saying everyone's a genius. Turns out basketball comes down to a lot of luck when the ball is just sitting up there on the rim. Could Teske have maybe tipped it in? Sure. Would you have thought about going back? I get the plus-minus, but that Johns wasn't on the court when Michigan just didn't show up for the first 15 minutes, so that was going to impact the plus-minus regardless. If you go back and rewatch a lot of those Pritchard drives, Johns just kind of stays glued to his guy. I don't know how much of that was what they wanted, how much of that was just he hasn't played the 5 at all this year.
Yeah.
It's new defensive assignments, new everything. Michigan was not being able to bring any help, and Teskey potentially could have brought some help. And there are a point there I would have thought that they would think about going back to Teskey to shore up the defense. And I think that actually would have made a bigger impact than anything on the last play.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I hadn't really thought too much about that, of if you had Teskey in for that stretch where every single play was just Pritchard going downhill.
I think he scored 13 points in a row.
Probably could have certainly given him a better defensive chance than Johns. But at the same time, I mean, Johns was, other than the two missed free throws, Johns was great in this. He was defensive rebounding. He was blocking shots, like, beyond the scoring. He was really active.
He played really well. I'm not saying that he didn't play well or that Michigan's not in the game if Johns doesn't kind of change the whole flow of the game against that, with that small ball lineup. He played a long time in a row, and it could have been maybe even just a couple possessions, something that felt like might have made sense. It's tough to say.
And
it's easy
in the
to say.
first half, John wasn't that good yesterday. It was one of those days. Teskey was not that good in that game. So I'm just not sure, like, why this is a talking point. But yeah,
it's a fair. I see both sides of it. Honestly,
frankly, they were lucky to even get to overtime.
You could almost say they were. I could see both sides. I mean, there was a point in the second half where it felt like Michigan could have taken an actual lead.
Right. They went up 3 with just under 8 minutes to go.
And then Eli got stripped in the middle of the floor.
Right.
That moment was the most costly play of the game. Because if they go and score there, I think the game might be pretty much over. Right? Yeah. There was like 4 minutes left.
Yeah, the things that really stick out to me that I feel like were overshadowed because of the ending were, Eli and the press break in those situations where you're just kind of scratching your head, and Xavier Simpson, God bless the guy. I know that he does everything.
Let's get into it.
The turnover, like, for a guy with 11 assists, and you know how good he is and how smart of a player he is. Like, I don't care about turnovers, right? Especially if you're trying to play a little bit faster or whatever. But just the unforced things, I just don't know what to make of them. So what do you think?
So there's a lot to unpack with Xavier Simpson. Mm-hmm. He had the 2, I think, one-handed passes in a row that were turnovers sort of early in the second half.
Yes.
Immediately before that, he had a one-handed pass right on the money for Isaiah Livers to score a layup. Mm-hmm. Michigan came back in the game because it was able to play up-tempo and not let Oregon get its defense set. Mm-hmm. Simpson had, I think, 7 assists in the second half. Michigan doesn't get back into that game without Simpson dominating the game. Did he have poor passes that were turnovers? Yeah. Did that change the game? Sure. The bigger issue for me is his finishing and where to come down on, I guess, what that means. So he was 3 of 10 on twos. He was really bad finishing at Illinois. Everyone's reaction seems to be, why is he trying to finish? Why is he driving? Why would he try to score? But before those 2 games, he was shooting 72% at the rim.
Right.
So when he was making those shots, it was this, Xavier can keep the defensive honest and score right at the basket. Now it's all of a sudden this, he's trying to be a hero and do too much.
Well, and part of it's the competition too. You're talking about Illinois and Oregon, 2 teams that have some big long bigs who can get up and play. It feels like to me that some of the looks he was having earlier, now correct me if I'm wrong, because this could be revisionist history, but like it seemed like a lot of looks that he had earlier was him getting further into the kind of interior of the post and getting more kind of maybe acrobatic layups or kind of finishes like literally close to the rim. Whereas the last 2 games it seemed it's way more sky hooky reliant and kind of these runners, flyers. Is that how you remember things, or am I just making this up?
I feel like he's been making those shots this year.
Okay.
He obviously did not make them this week, and I'm not sure where to come down on what's reality, right? He's probably not going to be a 72% shooter at the rim over a 30 whatever game season.
Mm-hmm.
He's probably also not going to shoot 22% at the rim like he did over the last week. If he shoots 50% at the rim over the last week, Michigan has at least one win. So I don't know that you can just say that his finishing, or that him trying to attack, he got outplayed. Peyton Pritchard outplayed him in the battle of two great point guards, right? I don't know what else there is to say, and it seems to be this take that Michigan needs to retool or completely change what it is because of that. But you have to understand how much Simpson did in that game that got Michigan back into that game, and I feel like that just goes completely overlooked.
Well, and part of it is because this is everyone knows – like the novelty of Xavier Simpson is gone, and now it's just kind of how can you win every game for Michigan, because that's basically what's expected of you. Like it's kind of swung from everyone just being so delighted that he's good to now being like, we have to count on you for every single thing. It's kind of the nature of how these things work.
Yeah, that's fair. It's just the polarizing nature. It boggles my mind considering how good he's been, how many games he's won, and then that
I saw
every
some people
loss
have been like,
seems to fall squarely on his shoulders.
When do they start going to DeJulius ahead of him? I mean, that's just insane. That is not a conversation. Like if anyone is out there thinking that's not now. Should DeJulius maybe get more minutes at the 2, or should they look more at this 3-guard offense and stuff like that? That's key spots. Okay, you can have that conversation, but they are not going away from Xavier Simpson ever, nor should they.
Correct. Let's get into a couple other talking points from this game, because I can't just keep having this Xavier Simpson conversation, because I just can't fathom how people think the way they think about Xavier Simpson. Franz Wagner looked a little shaky early. Hit a 3, but then kind of looked uncomfortable, and then just took over. What did you see from him? What do you think?
Say it again. You zonked out.
Where are you at with Franz Wagner? What did you think of his game? What does it say going forward?
I mean, that's the funny thing. I kind of wrote this, that if they had won this game, can you imagine all the things that would be written out of it about here comes Franz Wagner, this is it, David DeJulius. Oh man, now they have the option of running Johns at the 5, like the dichotomy of winning and losing and just how people view things is always just fascinating to me. But on Franz, I think this was a big step for him. I mean, he needed some confidence. It's probably kind of a bummer for him that it came in a loss, but he needed to see some shots go in, and he went 4 for 7 on threes. Oregon learned the hard way as that day kind of went on that. Because I think they watched the same tape we did, and it was understandable to play off of him. We talked about this, I think, on the preview, that right now you're able to play off Franz, and that's going to kind of make the offense a little bit claustrophobic in the half court. Well, this is good tape for Michigan to have out there, that teams know that you have to stay with him. And I was more encouraged by him. The 3-point shooting aside, because we know he can do that. It was more of a matter of when do they start falling. I was far more encouraged by him putting the ball on the deck and going and finishing strong a few times. He had that one really, really good take in the second half against contact with the end one finish where you're like, that is big time. That gives them a very different element. And maybe you could play, if he starts doing stuff like that, you can have different conversations, I think, about putting the ball in his hands in certain spots.
Yes,
Am I going too far already off of one game?
A little bit. I don't think you're gonna put him in a bunch of ball screens, but you can put him in enough. He can do some different things.
Right. It's nice to have the option instead of having to do Xavier in a ball screen 96% of your possessions.
He played really well in transition. Really ran the floor, beat guys on the court, finished pretty consistently. Scored on one of those little kind of shuffle cuts where he came across the other post and scored. He scored on that play almost like once a game when he was playing in Europe last year. So that's kind of his sweet spot. And he just looks so much more comfortable catching the ball, dribbling in traffic, just kind of being out there. And I still think, like, if he can give Michigan this sort of efficient offense, right? Because he doesn't need a lot of touches to score, right? If you find him, he's going to score. And that is, he looked like the player that you would have expected coming into this year. So that's probably the best takeaway out of this game from a Michigan point of view, in my opinion, even better than Johns and DeJulius playing well off the bench. If you're talking about what this team can look like later in the year, it starts with Franz Wagner being a dude who can score in all different ways. And he really showed that, I think.
Yeah, in a perfect world, you say, okay, when people say Michigan isn't nearly as good as we thought and blah, 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 you say, okay, well, if that's what you want to say, now let's consider a game in which Franz plays the way he did, Xavier plays the way he did, Teske plays like a normal game, right? And you get the second half version of Isaiah Livers. That's a top 10 team.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan.
And now that's hard to do day in and day out, but like, yeah, I totally agree. Sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I was agreeing with you. We're good here. I
also don't miss dunks.
A lot of missed dunks.
That was very strange.
It was just a weird game altogether. I wrote that it was sort of the epitome of December, a great December game, right? Like it had all the drama, but there were just the drama was fueled by mistakes from both teams. I don't really think either team is like March. You think about a perfect game, like two teams making big plays back and forth. This was big play mistake.
Yeah. It was kind of just a mess. It just looked rather ramshackled and kind of like that game felt the way Boris Johnson looks. So we'll go with that.
Oh boy!
What else do you got?
Any other Michigan takes you want to get into before we get into questions? Biggest concern coming out of that game for you?
I do feel like this is hard, kind of just off the top of the head. I'd like to probably see a little bit more production out of the bench than just, obviously, you got great stuff from DeJulius and Johns. Like, that was it. I mean, that was a 7-man rotation, basically pretty tight, and that's it.
And I'm not sure you can afford to play the other two for 6 minutes. Don't disagree. Getting past 7 is really hard.
Yeah,
Colin Kessler has not looked good, and I think Johns might have to be the backup. I want to talk about everyone telling me all summer that Johns played out of position last year. Turns out he's a pretty good small ball 5. I think that is an option that this team's going to have to embrace, and I think Castleton has been in quite a slump where every time he gets on the floor, he either turns it over or tries to cheat and steal a post entry pass and either fouls or gives up a dunk. That's something Michigan needs to figure out because they're so reliant on Teske playing 32 minutes, not getting in foul trouble and controlling the entire paint.
Yeah, so I would say two things here. Like, one, if you want to talk about concerns, like, is it nice that you now have the option of Johns at the 5? Yes. At the same time, it's like, of all of the things that were set and stable on this team, John Teske being your kind of foundational 5-man was pretty high on that list. To now be going into mid-December and being like, let's turn this upside down a little bit is, I wouldn't say, disconcerting, but it's certainly like, is that a good thing? Maybe. Also, maybe not. Because if you're going to start trying to change things like that, like, Brandon Johns looked like he was just getting comfortable doing what he was doing, and I don't know if he's practiced that much at the 5. It sounded yesterday like he hasn't, that they just kind of did it, which is interesting, obviously, but when I tried to ask Juwan, how much of this was a plan going into the game and how much of this was just kind of the circumstances of the moment, and he just did not answer the question at all, which sometimes happens over there. I don't know. I kind of go back and forth on, I don't know how thrilled Johns is to play the 5. I'm sure he wants to get minutes, but it's interesting. It's interesting asking more of him when he's just starting to kind of get comfortable doing what is needed.
Well,
does that make
all I'm
sense?
saying
Like,
is
just because
the
last
path
year
of
he was
least
so
resistance.
out of sorts. He was so out of sorts last year that it's like, it's been good just to see him kind of get some stability. And now it's going to be like, maybe change things up. I don't know.
Here's the thing. You want Franz and Isaiah Livers to play 35-ish minutes a game. Is that right? If you want Johns to play 25, where is he going to get that playing time, right? And so
It's fair.
if he can, like, the gap is at the 5, right? The gap is at the backup 5, especially when you're trying to find minutes for DeJulius, even at the 3. So I think that's why it makes a lot of sense. If you're going to have 7 guys, get your 7 guys the most minutes you can and spread it out. Against a team like Illinois, you're never going to be able to go to that. Against a team like Iowa, probably not. But
see, I'm not arguing the fact that,
where-
like, I'm certainly not arguing the fact that in a perfect world, Brandon Johns is playing both spots. You know? I'm just kind of saying, okay, what actually comes of this, though? I'm just trying to think of, it's not always as easy as just, this makes the most sense, so do it.
That's true.
You know what I mean? Like, that's the only point I'm bringing up. Because, yeah, Brandon Johns being able to give you a small ball 5 and just change games kind of on a dime like that is enormous. And then at the same time, being able to play him at the 4 alongside Teskey when suddenly you become this great offensive rebounding team out of nowhere, right? Because Brandon Johns is proving that is not, I think, a mirage. I think he looks locked in on rebounding like that. He is programmed that way right now. So you put him in there with Teskey, you can just, like, let the shots fly and let those guys just go hunting for points down there.
Yeah, I think that it'll be interesting how they use him in these 2 bye games coming up.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very
Do you want to establish the small ball 5 as a thing, or do you keep going to Colin or Austin or whoever in your normal rotation, right?
I totally agree. These are the games to chart the rotations and kind of get an idea of what they're actually talking about internally there, because they're not going to come out and say it.
No, but it'll be maybe something of a tell, or maybe they just do it matchup based. And it could be that I have not looked at Presbyterian's lineup, but they might play like a 6'4" guy at center for all we know, so they might have to. But we'll get into that later. We got plenty of time.
I'm looking forward to that Presbyterian breakdown. It's going to be great. All right.
Got to.
You want to get into some questions?
Let's get into some questions because we'll hit on some other stuff as we go through it. Sure. Got a lot here. I guess your Lions jab really drew in the questions.
Pretty easy. It's very easy to motivate angry Lions fans. So, you have a first one here pulled up?
Let's see. This seems relevant. Down 1, 20 seconds left. What are you drawing up to score for Michigan and Michigan State?
Oh, I love that. Because the real answer is exactly pretty much what they did yesterday.
Correct.
So, and it's almost for both teams.
Yeah, I'm interested. So I would say a 1-4 ball screen most of the time because
right. Michigan State would be a 1-5 ball screen for me. I'd want Tillman involved. Probably him rolling instead of popping, but then giving Cassius, if they switch, having a big that he can try to take 1-on-1, and if they don't, a guy that he can either shoot over or try to take to the basket and draw a foul.
Michigan State's problem is you don't have a pop guy.
Correct.
Right. I don't know who you would put in that spot if you were going to try to pop the ball screen. I would have said maybe even like Gabe Brown, because I like running a ball screen in this situation with the guy who you haven't been ball screening all game with, which I actually like what Michigan did, where they use Livers there, especially if it's a shooter and you can kind of slip it. I think that's probably the go-to play with 10 seconds left in a game for almost every coach in college basketball.
No doubt.
Now it's not the most exciting.
Franz, maybe I could certainly see this conversation in January being, ideal. Maybe it's a, pick and pop, something like that. I don't,
Yeah. I don't know that I would. Are you saying Franz as the ball handler or as a screener?
As a shooter, almost coming off like running him around like a Matt McQuaid type situation, just trying to find the best spot to get him a clean look.
Yeah,
especially if you need a three. If you need a three, that's the play for Michigan.
That the reason you like a ball screen in this situation, rather than maybe some more intricate off-ball stuff, is it's a lot easier if something gets blown up to still get a shot, right? You're going to get something out of a ball screen. If you run, say you run Franz Wagner off 3 screens and Michigan State switches it perfectly and denies the pass, all of a sudden you have nothing with 3 seconds left and you have to make something out of nothing. A ball screen, you're going to get something. You're probably going to get at least a shot on the rim. And really, that's the most important part of getting like if you get a shot on the rim, you have some chance to win the game. Sure. So that's kind of how I look at the logic of those situations.
Agreed. Okay, let's see. What will the conference record of the Big Ten winner be this year?
Ooh. I will go with 15-5.
I'm saying the same, and I think it'll be at least a 2-team share.
And those 2 teams are?
Ooh, that was unfair. I'll say... there's a very real chance there's like a 3-way tie, and it's like Michigan State, Ohio State, Maryland, something like that.
There's a chance of that.
Yeah.
I would say don't sleep on Purdue. They have the easiest schedule. But I think Ohio State ties with someone up there. That's where I'm at right now.
Sounds right to me.
I guess that can flow into another question here. We got, what do you make of Ohio State's scheduling advantage over other contenders? So I have a couple numbers here. The Bart Torvik conference strength of schedule, Ohio State has the worst in the conference, or the easiest. Important to point out that the best team usually has an easier schedule because they can't play themselves. But Ohio State also only plays 6 games against the top 5 teams. Michigan and Maryland play 7. Purdue plays 5. So do you think that makes a big difference in the race? Or
I mean, it certainly is going to... I mean, the schedule is a schedule. Of course, it's going to make some kind of difference if you don't have to play a loaded schedule versus the teams that do. I'm also like, okay, well, what else is your solution? You know how hard it is to schedule out a 20-game schedule in a 14-team conference? Like, this is going to happen. I know it's easy just to kind of...
It's going to happen less often for Michigan and Michigan State, though, because as long as they're both good.
What makes you say that?
Because they have locked in rivalry games.
Sure. But it's certainly better than the alternative of, when they had the single play in years past and everyone would lose their freaking minds. Rightfully so. I agree.
But it's something to at least consider.
Right. Like my counter would always be, what's the solution? What's the alternative?
I don't have a solution. I just am here to complain about problems.
That should be the tagline of this podcast. That is perfect. Okay. All
right. I got one here for you.
All right.
Do you think DeJulius is in Michigan's starting lineup by the end of the season?
No.
He's perfect to come off the bench.
Yes.
I think that last game shows exactly why it's so important to have a guy like him off the bench. Come in, hunt shots when no one else seems to have any interest in even trying to make a shot. He just comes in and changes the game.
I'll tell you what, it has been quite the roller coaster season for Mr. Eli Brooks. Coming out of the North Carolina game, people are touting him that he's going to be an all-league guy, and now people are ready to rip him down all over again, promote David DeJulius. I'm like, look, Eli had a bad game, and he'd probably be the first one to admit it. But I think in the entirety of this season, Eli Brooks has been pretty good starting too.
Eli has been probably Michigan's most improved player, I'd say.
Yes.
He has had a really good season. He's shooting 46% from 3. He has shot selection that makes me want to pull up Josh Langford film. But I don't think that you can just say that he played his worst game of the year, so let's just take him out of the starting lineup and move on to the next one. I mean, that is going to happen. He's played a bad game. And
correct me if I'm wrong, I believe DeJulius had a no-show performance within the last couple games. I forget which one. Was it Illinois?
Well, no one cares if you have a no-show performance off the bench because they just...
Good point.
It doesn't matter. That's life in the Big Ten, right? That's how it works.
I'm sorry, it was
going to play at this level.
The Louisville and Iowa games are what I'm thinking of. He went 1 for 9 combined in those 2 games from the field. Scored 4 points in those 2 games. I didn't hear anyone asking if David DeJulius was going to be starting after that. And I agree with you. I think exactly where he is right now, and the fact he can come in at either spot, and if Xavier does pick up a foul or something like that, it just makes perfect sense to keep him doing exactly what he's doing.
He can come in at the 1, 2, or 3.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
I mean, I just think he's in a perfect role, and I wouldn't mess with it, especially because I think Eli is generally going to be one of Michigan's better perimeter defenders.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I would give DeJulius that label quite yet, although he has improved on that end from November, I would say, which is a good sign in the right direction.
Here's a very important question from Aaron. What's the best non-cheesesteak sandwich in Philadelphia? Great question, Aaron. I would have to go with the Italian roast pork with the broccoli rabe from Tony Luke's. Would be my go-to there. Maybe a nice Italian hoagie from Campo's. My boy Mike Campo, fellow St. Joe's Prep grad. Him and his family have a great, very popular hoagie place. I can't recommend it enough. But if I'm going for one, if I'm home for a day and I got to eat a non-cheesesteak, I'm going the Italian roast pork with the broccoli rabe at Tony Luke's. It's outstanding.
All right. There you go. Let's see. What else are we getting into here? Because I have nothing to add on that point, but I'll have to try that sandwich sometime. All right. Here, let's get a Michigan State question. Why exactly is Bingham starting but getting less minutes than other options at the 4? Is it fitness, defense? When he's at his best, he seems to be a difference maker.
I feel like it's knowing Izzo, my guess would be that this is a situation where either someone else has to earn the starting job at the 4, or he is trying his damnedest to hope that Marcus Bingham can find some level of confidence or solid play, and that maybe he'll come out one of these games playing really well and get to stay in. But as of now, he's such an easy guy he makes one mistake that's glaring, usually in ball screen defense, and then he's out of the game. Then Izzo goes to a more kind of, not traditional lineup, but one that he feels more comfortable with on defense, and then he almost forgets to put Bingham back in. That would be my guess.
Fair enough. That kind of logic makes sense, I would say. Just it's like all one big motivational ploy to get the most out of everyone at the same time based on what you think they need at the time. Mm-hmm. Feels very Izzo to me.
Yeah, and I'm still curious to see, I have been thinking here for a couple weeks that there's going to be one of these games that are going to pop up and Malik Hall is going to be coming out in the starting lineup. And they're going to give him a shot at locking this thing down. But, Thomas Kithier had a really nice game yesterday. I don't think it's out of the question that he reemerges as your starting 4 at some point, maybe soon. But Bingham, for all of the flashes of talent there and all of those moments where you say, man, you just look at what this guy could be. Then there's just these stretches where, you're just kind of left wondering, what's it going to take for this thing to come together more quickly.
All right, I've got another one for you.
All right.
What the heck is happening in the Big Ten this year? It seems like complete chaos. Even arguably the worst team almost beat Indiana. Hold on, Northwestern's the worst team, not Nebraska. I've made this prediction. And is Rutgers the new Big Ten favorite?
First of all, mad props to Rutgers.
We're not giving anyone props for
Why not?
Seton Hall. We've decided that a long time. I predicted that win months ago, I feel like.
You did.
Did I
doesn't make it any less impressive.
Okay.
Winning the Battle of New Jersey, Did you see the Schiano speech, by the way?
Lunatic.
Oh,
what on earth?
What is that?
I didn't know what was happening when my TV shifted to that. I was like, holy boy, what is going on here? This is why we cover college basketball.
Unbelievable. So what's going on in the Big Ten this year? I can't tell if if it's always just seems like chaos at every time at like this time of year, and we just forget the previous year's chaos and only remember how things ended. Because let's look at the big picture. All right, so Michigan State is a little bit of an outlier here, right? There are completely unique and different situations there, and they clearly have not reached quite the level that we expect. Let's take that out of the conversation here, okay? Ohio State was a preseason top 15 teams, a lot of places. Some very smart people picked them to finish second in the Big Ten behind Michigan State. Not naming names here, but me. Maryland, preseason top 15 team. A lot of talent. There's no reason that they shouldn't be among some of the best teams in the country. Penn State was right on the border of kind of being in this conversation, and I think that they're proving themselves. And Michigan, I think we're seeing right now in terms of this team that is in the middle of its two selves is probably closer to reality. I don't know if it's that mind-boggling or crazy or inexplicable, you know? It's not like Nebraska, Northwestern, and Minnesota are running away with things, or like there's very few teams that I can point to as being total disappointments. Illinois at times would be the closest thing for me personally. But everything else I think is going relatively as expected. What do you think?
I think people forget how college basketball works around this time in the year. And I think the Big Ten playing Big Ten games in December makes it feel more chaotic. In league, I know the ACC played some conference games too, but you forget what happens in January, February in a Big Ten schedule. You lose random games. It's just part of it. Playing those when everyone else is playing the Alabama A&Ms of the world.
Right.
It makes it look like it's this chaotic league, right? So that's where I start. And you look, I mean, what's really changed from preseason expectations? You might put Michigan in the top tier, if you're going to say a top 5. I think you still have the middle tier of Iowa, Penn State, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Rutgers, maybe. I mean, those are the teams you thought would be in that 30 to 50 range. Right. And then you have Minnesota, Northwestern, Nebraska. There hasn't been a road win. I just don't think it's that crazy.
Yeah.
It's just I know how college basketball goes.
I'm sure some people were taken aback by Maryland losing at Penn State, but like I don't think that was that surprising. Was Penn State favored in that game?
Yes, they were.
So
and Illinois was favored against Michigan.
Penn State's pretty good. And then it's a road game. You know, the fact that no road teams won, I think is pretty interesting. But it's also probably a product of just 1 week of league play, you know.
It also might change by the time this podcast is finished.
Ohio State is at Minnesota tonight, which
Purdue's at Nebraska right now.
Oh, I forgot. Is that on now?
Yeah. Just started.
Fired up.
So, I mean, I just think that is all part of it, and I wouldn't really overreact to anything that's happening right now. Can we talk about Ohio State for a sec?
Yes.
Could there be a little bit of fool's gold with this start they've had to the year? And can we talk about who was number 1 in the first net rating last year and who never plays home and homes in the non-conference? And maybe we should check ourselves a little bit on how good Ohio State's going to be.
Dylan, I got to tell you, we can talk about whatever you want. This is half your podcast, so if you...
Okay, well, I want you to tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Who was one in the first net last year?
Ohio State.
Is that right?
Because Ohio State just beat the shit out of bad teams in November, just like they did. I know they beat Villanova. They won at North Carolina after Baycott got hurt.
They won at Creighton. They beat a bad UCLA team on a neutral court.
Last year, yeah. So they were, and then they lost 12 Big Ten games. I'm not saying this is a team that's bad by any means. Mm-hmm. I just think it feels a lot like maybe Michigan last year, where their undefeated record says more about their schedule than like they're the best. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that said, I think Ohio State is a real team in terms of the conversation for Final Four contenders, right? If you want to sit down and have your conversation of 15 teams that we could see in April, I'm certainly including Ohio State. Are they a runaway go 17-3 in the Big Ten? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Like,
and
I agree with you. 15-5 sounds right to me, and that means Ohio State's going to lose 5 games, at least.
Yeah. And 20-plus point wins against Villanova, North Carolina, and Penn State, that's badass. That's like, they're good.
Mm-hmm.
But that's very Michigan last year.
Yeah.
If they played Michigan or Michigan State schedule this year instead of the 180th toughest schedule,
right,
I think you might look at them a little differently. I think they would have some losses, right?
It's a bummer that they're going to be without Dwayne Washington, at least tonight. We'll see how. I hope that he's back for next weekend. But put it this way, we'll find out soon. They got 2 real ass games coming up. They got Kentucky on a neutral floor and West Virginia. Is that game in Cleveland or something?
Is it?
I think that's that Cleveland Classic or something. Yeah,
I never knew there was a Cleveland Classic, and I live in.
You got to get out there. I want a live pod from the.
I'm gonna be in Ann Arbor.
Oh, well, there you go. But they play Kentucky in Vegas, and they play West Virginia in Cleveland. I'll say they fall somewhere in there. One of those two.
I'm not going to make any bold predictions about a game that might be played before this podcast airs, but I'm going to be watching the game at the barn tonight.
No doubt. No doubt.
So
it's projected for. That's surprising me. That's projected as a 9-point Ohio State win on Ken Palm.
Yeah, the Vegas dropped to 7.
Interesting.
But either way,
Minnesota did just lose by 20 to Iowa. It scored 52 points against a defense. I think you and me, Otis, maybe a couple other guys could go put up 52 on Iowa.
Iowa looks legit. Iowa spanked Iowa State on the road. Don't sleep on the Hawkeyes.
Look at you are all over the place on that team. My God.
They're showing me something, man.
You want to talk about unpredictable things in the Big Ten. I think you just complimenting Iowa is now by far my most surprising thing of this Big Ten season.
I watched that whole Iowa State game on Thursday, and it was impressive. I think Iowa State might be not great, but still.
Say, you know who Iowa State lost to earlier this year? Seton Hall.
Yeah, but they got revenge.
They did beat Iowa State did beat UMKC and Billy Donlin though, for what it's worth.
You got to throw that shade.
Next question.
Get back to a question.
I've been meaning to reach out to Billy. They played at Allen Fieldhouse yesterday. Lost by like 1,000 to Kansas. I need to hear how that experience was. My God. What do Michigan and Michigan State basketball teams need for Christmas before their big showdown? Obviously,
that's cute.
Obviously, the boys play on I want to say January 5th. That game will be in East Lansing. Crazy that you go from one year where they played 3 times in the last 3 weeks of the or twice in the last 2 weeks of the season, and then once in the Big Ten championship game, to a January 5th showdown between the two. Very strange.
You think that I was screaming for this last year, so
I know
I'm on board with it. Maybe the Big Ten schedule makers listen to this podcast. They said that, damn, that's a really good take.
I think some people who have a hand in the Big Ten schedule probably listen to this podcast.
I think they made a good decision to split the games up. It was dumb. I think let's start with Michigan State.
Yes.
They need.
There's only one word.
3-point shooting.
Okay. Shooting was going to be my short answer, but yes. Yes, they need 3-point shooting. Desperately.
If you could give the gift of 3-point shooting above 40% to one Michigan State player, who would you supply it to?
Probably, I mean,
this is easy.
You're going to say Rocket or Gabe?
I was going to say Aaron Henry.
Well, I think that the other two are going to end up shooting more threes than Aaron. So True. That would be my thought. But, yeah, I mean, you go through these numbers. Cassius is 20 for 60. That's 33%. Xavier Tillman, 4 for 17. Rocket Watts, 6 for 29. Bingham, 3 for 11. Aaron Henry, 10 for 26. He's the best on the team at 38%. Malik Hall, 4 for 10 at 40%, whatever. Gabe Brown, 11 for 33 at 33%. I do think Gabe will find an uptick at some point. I think it's just kind of, they're just not falling right now. The bigger question for me is, what does Rocket Watts look like when he comes back?
And Yeah, that's probably I would have more confidence in Gabe figuring out from three than Rocket at this point, just based on their track records, right? Yeah. But I guess we talked about it before. If you can kind of rebuild Rocket into a more efficient player, this is the time, and it'd be really interesting to see when he gets back and how he plays.
The bummer is that he's in a walking boot, so this was supposed to be this time where he could figure out how to play basketball, and instead he's been watching. That's not ideal at all. Just a double kick in the ass between losing Langford and then losing Hall at the time or not Hall, Rocket at the time where he should have been kind of like you said, being rebuilt. Not good. So Michigan, the other thing to give to Michigan State for Christmas is whatever Cassius Winston wants. So for Michigan, what do you got?
You make me go first for both. I would go with a secondary creator. Someone who can play off a ball screen and pass and shoot. Or a mid-range jumper for Xavier Simpson.
That's a pretty good one. I would say the gift of unwavering confidence for Franz Wagner would be mine. Because that dude seems like an emotional roller coaster on any given day. He's either kicking his own ass about something, or he is worried about the officials, or he's worried about this, that, or the other thing. If he could just find a little, what was that old beeline expression? Something in the air, or steady air, or something like that. I forget. How soon we forget, right? Whatever. If Franz could find just a little emotional stability, I think would be mine.
Yes, that's a good one. I don't really know if Wagner's play with emotional stability.
Good point. You can channel it. You can channel all of his emotions. Yeah. And don't get me wrong. I'm all for him being a huge villain in the Big Ten, the same way his brother was. I am here for it. Want to see it. Speaking of, Michigan State could use a villain character. That's not the head coach.
I don't even know if there's a candidate.
Yeah, they need a little edge to them, because like, say what you will, like Matt McQuaid was like a fiery dude, you know, and they don't have that.
He was a villain.
That is something that they're missing. I might have to bring that up tomorrow when during availability tomorrow. Who can give that team a little attitude back to them? I think they need that. What do you think? This is very narrative driven. This is right up.
No, I'm in on villains. I was tweeting about Adam Woodbury the other night.
Nice.
I'm all in on villains.
Legend.
That's my little legend. Poke two people in one game. Incredible. All right, next question. Who finishes higher in the Big Ten this year? Penn State or Maryland? Do it. You know
Maryland.
You want to.
No, it's going to be Maryland.
All right. I think Maryland, but they have a tough conference schedule.
They do. I'm all in on Penn State going to the NCAA tournament, though. Let's go.
Penn State makes the NCAA tournament. Will you cover their run instead of Michigan or Michigan State? You might. I wouldn't put it past you. All right. You got any other ones pulled up here?
Let's see. I'm sure there's something good.
I have one here about going back to the Illinois game. Would you have attacked the Illinois defense by running Franz in the ball screen game against Georgie B as a secondary
Bashanis-Vili, come on.
Bashanis-Vili to I guess it's supposed to say contrast Xavier's ball screen action? I would not, because Franz played probably his worst game of the year against Illinois.
Right.
He was they tried to actually run him through a lot of stuff, I think, for that reason, and he just kept turning it over. So I think that's something that Michigan might do down the line, but I don't know that it would have really saved the day at Illinois.
Yeah, I kind of feel like of what we've seen in terms of matchups for Wagner, I do kind of think that Georgie was like the best possible guy to put on him, maybe like in the league, because he's bigger, stronger. He's not that dramatically slower than him, right? Like, I don't know if Franz is crushing Georgie going off the bounce or anything. Like, that doesn't seem. Do you agree?
I disagree, because Franz had 4 wide open threes, and I think if Franz is the player everyone thinks, that if you can't close out on him, it's probably not a good guy to guard him with.
It's fair. I was thinking more one-on-one, like if you can get physical with Franz a little bit, I think that can throw him off his game more so than speed or quickness. You know what I mean?
For sure.
That's more what I was thinking.
Franz is probably more comfortable posting a smaller, quicker guard than getting by a big guy right now. That's probably a fair take.
Yeah. Let's just hit refresh, make sure we didn't get any here that we might be missing.
Want to talk about Xavier Simpson's defense?
We should talk about Xavier Simpson's defense. This one comes from Jordan. Is it just me, or does it seem like Xavier's defense has taken a big step back this year? Not just versus Pritchard, but other games he seems to be getting beat to the basket a lot. It's worth the conversation.
Yeah, I think some of it comes down to playing against really good players. Peyton Pritchard is the real deal. Every stat he passed the test as far as what you'd want from a great point guard. But I can't say I expected to watch a Michigan game this year and see Michigan lose because Xavier Simpson gave up 13 straight points. And he had the strip on the final possession of regulation that still ended up in the basket but didn't count. I don't know that the thing about how Michigan plays defense is they don't provide a lot of help.
That was going to be my point.
You see guys get beat to the basket because Michigan plays a guard your yard. You're not going to overhelp in a way that a lot of teams have to play against Michigan because of the shooting on the perimeter, but don't necessarily want to. Michigan just plays like that by default.
Part of the reason that Michigan is, a fairly decent top 25 defensive team is in part because it puts Xavier on an island. And, it's willing to give guys just kind of free reign in getting him one-on-one. And if you get a player like Pritchard, then he's going to get his, man. Xavier Simpson's a really good defender. He's not Gary Payton. He's really good. But, come on now. Cassius Winston beat him in 3 games last year. That happened. Xavier Simpson is one of the better defensive point guards in the country. I think some of his reputation might have gotten maybe just a touch out of control here a little bit. It's really hard to keep elite point guards bottled up.
Well, here's the thing.
It's just the way it is.
Great offensive players can score over great deep. I would say great offensive players win those battles just because they make great shots and great plays. Oregon didn't go into that game thinking, well, we're just going to try to isolate Pritchard on Simpson. Nothing else was really working at that point.
Right.
Michigan had really, when they were just ball screening, Michigan actually did a pretty good job. And there were a lot of good defensive possessions where Michigan would drop coverage and Simpson would kind of trail around the end. Really, they made him uncomfortable. He got beat down the stretch. It happens. And I think Simpson's reputation is probably overrated on defense just because it's so highly rated, but also underrated on offense, right? So I think that what's interesting to me is that Michigan did not try to do something different in those final moments. And I get it because a lot of defense is like identity, right? And if you say this is how we're going to play, why would you stop? I don't know. It's easy to say in hindsight that they should have done something else. I don't know.
So I have a question. Players not named Cassius Winston, who you would take, like you just said, a great offensive player is always going to have the advantage in the one-on-one matchup against a great defensive player, right? Right. So how many guys not named Cassius Winston would you give the edge to in the Big Ten?
In the Big Ten, that are just going to do what Pritchard did to Simpson?
Maybe not to that level. But,
those type of players?
But yeah.
No one. I mean, how many players in college basketball, if you had to pick if we did a point guard draft, I think Pritchard and Winston are 2 of the first 2 that you pick, right? I mean, I get that Cole Anthony is going to be an amazing pro, but I don't think I'd take him if I was building a team to win a championship. Pritchard that team is going to make a run. That team is, and it's because of Pritchard, right? So I don't know point guards in the Big Ten that I would take that are just going to put Simpson, on an island.
Mm-hmm.
I can't really think of anyone other than Cash. Can you?
Not really. I mean, I'm sure there's people sitting on there, listening to this and saying Anthony Cowan should be in the conversation.
We're not saying that.
I wouldn't at all. Yeah, it's pretty far and it's pretty few and far between. But this is also, Xavier Simpson also made this his identity, and so through league play here, when it comes down to whether this team is going to be one of those teams that we're talking about in that 15-5 conversation, Xavier Simpson does have to be a shutdown point guard every time out. And I know it's so hard too, because in the past, I shouldn't put it that way. They ask so much of him offensively that it's really hard to do both.
He's doing more
extreme level
than last year.
I totally agree. Whereas, last year when they did have Ignas Brazdeikis, Jordan Poole, Charles Matthews, it was a little easier maybe for you to just kind of, you engage the offense and you lock down on defense, and that's just kind of the player you are. Well, now it's both. So that's a big task, and I'd love to ask him about it if he wants to talk to the media more.
Especially, his defensive reputation started in 2018 when he had a much, much smaller role.
That was his whole thing was shutting down the other point guard. That was basically his only job, it seemed like at times.
But he had other guys who can do more of the heavy lifting in offense. Last year, he wasn't Michigan's best defender. Charles Matthews was. Mm-hmm. It wasn't close. Mm-hmm. And Matthews struggled on offense, I think, maybe in part because he was doing so much on defense. This year, did you think he looked tired late in that game?
I thought he was maybe a little.
It's a lot to do at that level.
Yes.
And the pressure, I think, puts more maybe just mental work on a guard, right? Because you're breaking that press every time. I don't know.
I'm trying to go through. I'm going through these rosters. The only other dude who I could see giving him a time like that would be if you get DJ Carton on a really good day. I don't think it's out of the question that he could put numbers on Xavier.
Yeah, it's too early to say. I think with Carton, right? I mean,
just the way he plays and stuff like that, and I'm just trying to come up with names here.
I do think that Pritchard doing what he did shows how valuable it is. You need your ball screen point guard to be able to score, and Simpson's more of a 60-40 pass guy. Mm-hmm. And in a perfect world, he's like a 75-25 pass shot guy out of the ball screen. When Michigan's at its best, that's what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you said this in the preview pod. When Oregon's at its best, Pritchard's shooting more than he's passing. I don't think you would just put I guess Michigan basically did put Simpson on Island and try to have him match Pritchard basket for basket, but he didn't do it this time. I think Simpson is a better passer, but it's just interesting. Michigan doesn't have that guy that you can just say is going to get me an isolation bucket like that right now. Mm-hmm. And that's something that...
that DJ Carton is shooting 64% on twos?
Yep. I see that on the screen right now.
That's pretty good for a 6'2 guard. That's really good. He's a player. I'll be really curious to see. He's if I had a list... Here's a question for you. Give me the top 5 players you're most interested to see what they do over the course of the remaining Big Ten schedule.
Ooh, okay. Franz Wagner.
Mm-hmm.
DJ Carton. I'm a little intrigued by Luka Garza.
Oh, yeah.
What this can actually, is he going to be this?
Shatter some scoring records.
He's using 30% of possessions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for another good one here.
Kofi Coburn.
I'll give you Kofi.
Thank you. Lamar?
No, I've seen enough Lamar Stevens. I know what Lamar Stevens looks like. I've seen it all. He'll be better. He'll be a better version of himself, but I'm not intrigued by that.
No, the answer off the Penn State roster is actually probably Myron Jones.
The answer is not on the Penn State roster.
Okay.
I think Xavier Tillman.
Good one.
I think he has not been what I kind of thought he could be. He hasn't been bad, but he hasn't taken that next step. I'm curious. Really, it's just what Michigan State's ball screen offense looks like over the next 3 months, and how if they can find that sort of equilibrium.
Agreed. I like that.
Any other good names you want to watch?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would certainly consider putting Jones on it. Aaron Henry is definitely in that conversation. Just because he's, there's, if you were to come up with a mystery kind of the Big Ten, that's kind of it. I could maybe see like,
not Devontae Green,
Geo. I would be curious. I do feel like if a guy like Wiggins or Ayala at Maryland, if either of those dudes kind of become more consistent dudes than Maryland is, I lean more toward believing in Maryland. But I think I like our list.
It's good.
Yeah. Okay.
I've got one more question for you. Not on the list.
Let's go.
Will Seton Hall make the NCAA tournament?
Okay.
They could be 500 on New Year's Day.
I know.
Still have to play Maryland and DePaul.
And I'm not sure if they're going to do much better than 10-8 or maybe even 9-9 in the Big East at this rate. So,
and I feel bad because there's actually some injuries. It takes away from my initial take. Like I can say I'm right, but we'll see. Maybe they'll get together.
I'm going to say yes.
We need that to make the prophecy come true, though. 9 seed, first round win, get blown out in the second round, and be completely forgotten.
That's very true. But put it this way, Big East is rated right now still as the number 3 conference in the country. They are going to get a decent amount of bids out of a 10-team conference. So, I do think Seton Hall can finish 5th, which would get them in, but I'm not feeling nearly as good as I did previously. How about Butler?
Yeah,
Lavelle Jordan making moves. Only loss is a 1-point loss at Baylor. No shame in that at all.
Big one on Saturday against Purdue.
Absolutely. But all right, let's wrap it up on that.
I think that's good. We're just rambling now.
Quick shout out. Make sure if you're out there to give Sean Windsor's piece in today's Free Press. I guess it's available online too. You don't actually have to get a newspaper. But check out Sean's piece on Cassius Winston. I thought it was terrific, and it really gives some great insight into just things that you can't really quantify when you want to talk about what's going on with Michigan State. So give that a read. Sean did great work on it. Subscribe to The Athletic. Subscribe to UM Hoops. And if you would be so kind to leave us a review in the iTunes store, that really helps us out. So that'll do it. We will be back probably later this week or the following week, but we'll get in at least a couple more of these things before the holiday. We appreciate everyone listening, and be sure to tip your bartenders and your servers.